Everyone, good to see you. So today I'm with my friend Patricia, and she's going to divide her aloe and show us some of the succulents that she's got and talk about succulents and some information about her aloe plant, and we're just going to get going here. Here we go. Patricia, tell us about your aloe plant here. What happened to it?
Well, this is an aloe plant I've had for a few years now, actually, and it lives in my house under some grow lights in my basement. And I'm afraid it was ignored for a little bit of time, and when I got there, it's grown so large and heavy that it's kind of flopping over and falling out of its pot. And then it also had produced all these side shoots or offsets or pups, they're sometimes called. And I thought it'd be a really nice chance to take this time to make a video with Lisa and show people a little bit about how to divide the aloe and separate the pups from the main plant. And it's just a way of propagating your aloe. Well, I thought maybe we just talk a little bit about the succulents in general.
Okay.
So we have our aloe, and I think people mostly know this as a plant that has some medicinal properties. It can be the plant in your house that if you snap off a little piece of it inside, and I've got a leaf here, we can do that. You can see inside, I hope, that there's a gooey gel. Okay? And that gooey gel actually can be used in burn treatments. I found it's really great for sunburn if you have that. You can just take a piece of the leaf actually and rub it on your skin. And it will help that burn feel more comfortable for sure. I guess when we're thinking about what a succulent is, it really means a plant that's able to store water in its leaves. And so they have these thick, juicy, water storing leaves.
How are you going to
Okay.
take this apart?
All right, so it seems to me when I went to look at my plant and saw it was all flopped over, and really the dirt was literally pulling out of the pot and the dirt was completely dry, the soil in the pot. I actually have just watered it a little bit just to make sure it's a bit more moist, and that'll give us a chance to have it soften up. So when we remove the plant out of the pot, it'll make it a little bit more easy to separate. Let's just get it out and see what we've got in the soil. Like what we're hoping for, and I haven't peeked or anything yet, that these pups will actually have their own roots. And when we pull it all out, we hopefully can separate the pups with roots as separate plants and put them into individual pots.
Right.
So it's kind of a mystery about what we're going to find under the soil.
Patricia's going to take it apart. We're going to get a little bit up close and personal to this plant.
Yeah, that's great. So I don't know, some people like to use gloves. You certainly could if you wanted. Personally, I prefer not to. I kind of really like the hands-on feel of getting into things and seeing what's there. Here we are.
We're attacking the plant.
We can see the roots here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is just loosen the soil as much as I can. We'll do what we can to see what's actually there and take it apart. And I'm trying to be as gentle as I can because I don't want to damage any of the main roots if possible. I think with any kind of transplanting, it's probably a little bit of a challenge to maintain all the roots perfectly.
Right.
Like that's never going to happen.
Right.
But if we actually, are gentle and can leave the larger ones, your plant will just do just fine when you transplant it. Plants really have the ability to regenerate themselves. So if you lose a few leaves, if you damage the roots a little bit at the tips, it's not the end of the world. Okay? It should be really, really easy for that plant to recover. Okay, so as you can see, I'm getting a mound of dirt, or the old soil. I should call it soil properly because it is soil. It's a mix of a soilless mix that I've used before.
What does it mean by a soilless mix when people say that?
Okay, so when we're talking about a soilless mix, it means that you really don't have what I would say is like the mineral composition of the outdoor dirt you find in your garden. So when you think about outdoor dirt in your yard, it's really a mix of, broken down rock in tiny little pieces, plus any organic matter that's added to it, plus all the, bacteria, fungi, insects, and other organisms, worms that live in there, right? When we're talking about a soilless mix, it really just refers to what I would call a soil substitute. So it mimics soil in its texture and in its water holding capacity. But it's basically a mix usually of some type of peat moss or coir and white particles here that are perlite. Sometimes vermiculite is incorporated, but I don't see that as often anymore. Yeah, and then and I can see in this one there's a little bit of maybe a bark chips or shredded bark. But the thing about it is, in a soilless mix, unless fertilizer is added to it, it really doesn't have any nutrients for the plant. They're very minimal. Okay, so if you're going to use a soilless mix, you're going to have to supplement with some kind of fertilizer.
I think people want to know these things sometimes.
Great.
It's reduced quite a lot. Like there's a lot of soil, loose soil that's come off of it, but not so many roots. If you can tell, the roots are still attached.
That's it. And I think part of it is when you look at the pot it was in, it's fairly wide and shallow, right? So, and the plant is sort of tall and top heavy. So when we get to transplanting it, I'm going to choose a different shape of pot this time. The ones I brought are a little bit more narrow and tall. Okay, so you can see as you get closer that if we look at these offsets, they come off of sort of underground stems called stolons. You can see them growing here. And the good thing is, if I look at this particular stolon, you can actually see that there's a little clump of roots associated with the bottom of this, this offset. So great, this means we have a complete plant, shoots and roots that we can transfer to a new pot. So typically if you have very, very tiny offshoots in comparison to the parent plant, I think it's probably best to let those wait a little bit before you transplant. You really do want it to grow and be a little bit larger before you transplant. Okay, so I'm just looking. So that's a great one to transplant. These are all a little bit more tangled in together, so we'll figure out a plan for getting them apart. It might involve a sharp knife. Yeah, see this is an offshoot. It's quite a little one. I'll probably transplant the larger ones first and see if we can't get those other larger offsets potted up. And then, if you feel like it, you can always try with the little ones. You never know, you might succeed. So this one actually I just touched and the stolon has snapped. And so here we have our little offset to transplant. So that's fabulous. Okay, let's see here. This one is a little bit, yeah. When I look at this, there's like a large stem of the parent, and this one is quite attached to that. I think I might try cutting it, but maybe I'll work on the little guys first just to see what's okay. So this has come off. It looked like there was just maybe the tiny bit of root or stolon there. So we'll see what we can get. Sometimes they work out just so well and sometimes they don't. Okay, I'd say that's too small. Here's another one with a stolon. Yeah, but not a lot of root growth necessarily. So if we look in here, I've got two little guys here, but I don't know if they really have a whole lot of separate roots, and this large piece. So what I think I'm going to do with this larger offset is actually try to cut it off of the main parent plant. Okay, we'll see how that goes. All right,
here goes nothing, Patricia, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my sharp knife, and I sharpened this pretty well before I came. I just like to use just a plain type of sharp kitchen knife. That usually works well. So I'm just gonna wiggle it, see if I can't at least, tease it a little bit, soften it up. So I think what I'm going to do, I can feel the main part of the parent plant along here. So I'm just going to try to trim off a little bit here. Well, we'll see how it goes. I don't want to cut right through that parent plant, but I do want to cut through this one. So I'm just sawing back and forth, and okay, I've got this other offshoot. It's just going to be out in there. All right. Yeah. All right, and I'm hoping when I did my cut that I have got, there we are. Okay, that we have taken some of the roots with us, so that's great. And you can see the cut surface here. You can see where I've cut it on this side here as well. And just let me see what we can do with this last little guy here. Oh, and this leaf is just coming off, so let's just set that aside, which we know happens sometimes. Okay, and this one I think is just going to snap off right now. Okay.
That's our collection.
I think one thing I should mention though is that typically when you cut the plant and the tissue of the plant, in succulents especially, it tends to be very juicy because we talked about them being water storing. And so I think the best practice, I won't do it today, but the best thing is to leave this to dry. Leave it to dry for a couple of days, 1 to 2 days, even up to a week, honestly, maybe even more. But it allows the plant to kind of allow the cells here to dry and callus over. Because the reason for that is because it kind of leaves an open wound where essentially a lot of bacteria or fungi can get into. So if you let it dry off and callus over, it'll protect your plant a lot better.
Okay, what have you got in your hands here, Patricia?
So what I brought to show everyone is a specific type of potting mix, a soilless mix. And it's one that's used specifically for cacti, and that would be something that's really good for using for your succulents too. So again, you probably have in here a mix of peat moss, a little bit of perlite, but these mixes tend to have some added sand as well. Because when you're potting up a plant, you try to really, in your home, mimic the conditions the best that you can of where it grows in nature. So if it tends to grow in an arid, sandy type of soil, it's going to prefer that as well in your home.
Nice.
And if you're not, you don't wish to buy a specific premium cactus mix because they tend to be a little bit pricey, one tip is that you can just use a regular type of all-purpose potting mix, but add some sand to it.
And what would be the balance of sand and mix? Would it be a half and half, or?
I find that half and half is a little bit much. The sand I like to use, I brought some here, is
Let's take it up to the camera.
Yeah, you bet. So play sand, just because it's not a very...
Oh, play sand. Where'd you get play sand?
Oh gosh, where did I buy it? Typically it's like your home improvement stores will have play sand for people who want to build sandboxes for their children.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what I like to use. Sometimes you can find horticultural sand, but I find it's a lot more difficult to get a hold of. Here. We were talking about the mix to use sand to all-purpose. In the past, I've used about a quarter sand to a third sand to 2/3 or 3/4 of all-purpose mix. We need to choose a pot, and I brought a few pots here of different sizes, bigger and smaller. Smaller for the little offsets that we're going to transplant, and some bigger ones for the bigger guys.
I'll bring it like a little closer so you can choose your pots, because these are going to be at your place, right? So this.
Well, one might end up at your place too.
Really? I could try it under a grow light. I always find because all my windows are east facing.
I see.
That my succulents become leggy. So it's not a great location to grow succulents in an east facing, but I do have grow lights.
Okay.
And I'm growing seeds under them, but I still have a little bit of room.
Well, you're certainly welcome to have one.
Oh, that's so cool. Sweet, that's my plan all along.
I see.
All right. no, not at all. Okay, so what pot choices would you like for your?
Well, like I said, I'll save my largest pot for the mother plant. For this one here, I think we could probably get away with something like this one, this size here.
Nice.
Just because when we think about how that plant is going to fit in there, okay, we still want, enough room for a bit of soil and roots. And to me, like, the plant looks about 2/3 the size of the pot. So to me, something like this is about right.
Right.
Usually the thing with succulents is that when you care for them, you don't want their soil to be soggy. Right? They prefer it to be drier, and they prefer the soil to dry out completely or very close to it between waterings.
Absolutely.
So if you have a small type of plant in a really large pot, it can take ages for that soil to really dry out well. And
Right.
The plant doesn't really prefer that. So often you see succulents look like they just fit in their pots, really. I prefer a pot with a drainage hole. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but a lot of pots you find for sale don't have any drainage holes. They're more like decorative pots, but I think for succulents, it's better to have something that actually has some drainage. It encourages that soil to dry out as well.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't end up overwatering or sitting in water and stuff like
Exactly.
that. Yeah,
You bet. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like clay too, just because it's quite porous.
Yeah.
All right, so then our plan is to kind of eyeball it in the sense that I like to think, okay, how deep am I going to plant this plant? How much soil am I going to need to fill the pot? And just have a little look about where that's going to rest. So to me, it seems like I'll need to add about 1.5 inches of soil in the bottom, and then put in our plant, and then we'll chop it up a little bit more around the edges.
Right, and we can get a close-up just to see how deep you're
Okay.
planting it too
Sure.
as well.
Okay.
How deep are you going to plant this guy?
All right, so what I'm going to do, because I don't think it's, the heavy part of the plant is, we don't want to rest right on the bottom, right? So I'm going to build up a little soil base in the pot that it's going to sit on. And the part that was under the soil before, we still want to cover with soil, but leave the green leaves exposed.
Nice.
Okay, all right, so just let me reach in and get a little bit of the potting mix. So I've added what I think is about 1.5 inches of soil at the bottom. Okay, and I've just taken it straight from the bag, so it's just slightly moist from being in that newly opened bag. Okay, and I'm going to hold my plant up a little bit in the air, grab some more soil, and then my method is just to kind of drop it or, slightly tuck it around the edges on all the sides.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy, but I find it works quite well. And then I'm just going to gently press that soil down a little bit to kind of firm it in and hold it in place.
Nice.
Yeah, so I suspect because it's a little bit top heavy, we might get a bit of flopping over. So what I might do is just, when I am able to, I'll find a little stake or something to set it against to hold it upright, just till those roots get a little bit more established.
Do you want a chopstick or a skewer? A couple
Sure, do you
skewers?
have that kind of
I
thing?
do.
Yeah, chopsticks work well. Let's just change that over to put them this way. Okay, there we go. Maybe something like that.
That seems to work.
Yeah, just a little something to hold it upright.
Nice.
Yeah. And
The benefits of being in my kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. We'll just need a little saucer for it for the moment so the soil doesn't just keep spilling out the bottom hole. So I'm a big believer in just recycling. This is the one from yogurt, but they work well as a saucer. So again, I'm just trying really hard to do a little, do a little bit more with the plastics we have at home to use them for other things. I like the black ones actually. They just, kind of blend in with the whole plant and surroundings. Looks fine.
Nice, that's a
Okay.
great idea,
So
actually.
there we go.
Because it does have a little bit of a lip on it, right?
Yes, in fact, I brought up several types. Like some are a little bit better. If you know you're going to be adding water to the bottom, just pick a deeper lid. I think this was some kind of takeout container lid.
Nice.
So just use that. They
Well,
work
and
great.
then you don't have to pay.
Well, that's it. If you're like the frugal gardener, like I like to be sometimes, it's kind of win-win.
So here we go.
Okay.
I like this tiny little pot.
Yeah. There's some mix.
Deal. And I might be a little bit more messy than Patricia.
The mess is half the fun, right?
Yeah. Feels so good to get soil in my hands. So this is going to be a little more leaning too as well, so we might need a...
We might need a supplementary chopstick. Just
Okay.
over here.
And let me run downstairs and go get that steak for yours. Okay, so you
Great.
have this
Our
big guy.
Okay, well, I brought 2 pots thinking maybe one would work more than another, but they're more tall and narrow this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to see what would be sort of suitable here. So this one unfortunately has no drainage holes, and I'm kind of liking the idea of not filling the soil up super full and just using the edges of the pot to stabilize the plant.
Oh, that's smart.
Ultimately. Yeah, but I'm kind of thinking maybe the thing to do is just use the one with the drainage. All right. So I'm just going to add again. We'll add a little more soil at the bottom. All right. Yeah, and normally, just to mention it again, I would probably leave this for a couple of days to let that callus off. Okay. And then I'll hold up this guy. All right, I think that's pretty good in terms of the level there. Because again, I want to make sure that the green part is above soil and the rest is below the soil level. Okay, so my hope is that when these larger leaves spread out, they will rest on the edge of the pot a bit. And I think they are actually. And that's keeping it more upright. But I'm still going to just quickly take a stake, take it in on this side. I can see that's probably the place. We'll see if that works, just to hold it upright a bit more. Okay. I should mention too, though, that some types of aloes and other succulents, their growing habit in the wild isn't always straight upright. Like some types actually do have that kind of flopping behavior, so it's not unusual to have that happen with your plants,
Right.
and some of them. But I just like the look of it being a little more upright.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and these other two I'm just going to save, I think. I'll take them home, let them dry, and I'll see if I can't get them to root by putting them on some soil. Yeah.
Right.
And we'll see what happens. If not, no harm done. They
No
can
harm
just
done.
go to the compost.
Patricia, maybe show us the ones that you did, some other succulents that you did start on
Oh, I
soil.
did. So
Yeah.
that's right. So actually succulents are quite easy to propagate. So what I've done here is just put together an all-purpose mix. It's a porous mix, so it has quite a bit of perlite. I thought I'd try that, and I've mixed it with some extra sand. And so what I've done is removed leaves from some of my existing succulents. So this one here, which I kind of like because the leaves almost have facets to them. It's jewel-like. And so I thought I'd really like to have some more of that. This is a Paciveria glauca.
White.
White. And so if you look at the back side of it, just peek in there, you can see there's some spots where those leaves have been removed along the stem.
Yeah, I see.
Yep, so I basically just peeled them off gently, and again, let them sit for about a week to callus off.
Nice.
Yeah, and then once they're dry, all you have to do is really lay them on top of your soil in these smaller pots. This time I waited until I saw a few roots just starting to grow out of the tips. Some of them, the roots have developed a little bit more. So why don't we just look at this one here? So now you can see there's a bunch of roots growing out. Maybe it's easier to see against the black background. Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so we expect those to root, and then the roots will grow down into the soil, but also small tiny shoots will form as well. And a whole new little plant will grow from that, and eventually that plant will take over and use some of the nutrition and resources from the parent leaf. And then that leaf will sort of over time slowly wrinkle, shrink, and die.
One thing to say too is that you kind of have to have a lot of patience for it, right?
Oh, certainly. Like I just started these.
How long?
I think I plucked them off around Christmas time.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
So a couple months ago.
Yep. A little bit of waiting, a couple of weeks for calcing. There's no real rule for that. Honestly, you can leave them for ages.
Yeah.
I found if you forget about them, you can come back to them. And then they've been here in the pots for about 2 weeks.
Nice.
So yes, it's true. Succulents, I think, are fairly easy to propagate. It's just that they grow very slowly, and so you do have to have some patience there. Yeah.
So can you show us some of the other ones that you have here?
You
This
bet.
is part of your collection that you're
Yeah,
growing.
I just brought a few. I just got really keen this last year. Okay, so this is a relative of the aloe. This is called a gasteria. Okay, and this one's called Little Warty. It has a kind of a look of an aloe, but basically instead of having white markings like the aloe, it's got little bumpy warts on it.
I love that.
Okay, so sometimes there's a little bit of confusion between what's an aloe and what isn't. Okay,
The
here's
leaf
another.
seems thicker too.
Oh, it is, yes, definitely
Quite a
thicker.
bit thicker.
Yeah, one of the ways I can usually tell if succulents need watering, like I lift the pot to see how heavy it is, and if it's really light, it's likely time. But one of the things you can do is sort of feel the leaves, pinch them. If they still feel firm, then probably the plant is still okay. But if
Okay.
you find they're getting softer, then it's maybe time to water.
Nice.
It's just a clue.
Good.
Yeah,
Some
and
good tips.
here's another relative, the Haworthia. You can see this one here actually has its own little offset started. So when they get a little bigger, I'll probably try to divide that one up too.
Nice.
Yeah, this is kind of a cool one. Also related to the aloe, but it's interesting because it has what are called contractile roots. And what this means is that when the roots are in the soil, they have the ability to kind of shrink up and draw that plant down into the soil and really anchor it there.
Is there any other plant that does that? Like what other plants do that to you?
Certainly bulbs, your tulips have that. If this Christmas I grew some paper whites, the narcissus, and if you look at those, once the flowers are spent and you're taking them all apart, have a look at those roots, the big white roots there, and you'll discover that you can see that they're all wrinkly. And that's because they've contracted to hold those bulbs into the pot.
Hold up 1 second.
Do you have some? Oh, me too. I just didn't bring them. Oh, lovely.
So this is the last. So I don't know
how
if you can
pretty.
see this. But what is pop? So I've kind of like what not to
Christmas.
do is I cut back the ones that just were looking, got floppy and kind of died, the flowers died back, but you
Yeah.
can see just on top there's
They're
that
still
one, and
flowering.
and there's still a few in there that will come up. But if you want to pull one
The
out,
new
if
shoots.
you want to pull out the one
Okay.
one
what
of the
do you
ones
think?
that I cut back, yeah, go for it.
Okay, let's see what we can do. Again, I'll just try to wiggle it without wrecking the Christmas arrangement.
It's okay.
Oh wow, I don't know if I'll be able to. It's
Oh, wow,
all
look at
wound in there.
Wow.
Okay, I might have to.
Wow. Let's just pick it up and then you can see.
Okay, I will do that. Just let me get a good grip and we can really, I'm just going to move some of your stones. And we can see how much
Nice.
they've grown.
Wow.
Wow, look at that. That's amazing.
They did really well in there.
They did.
You might have a hard time getting
I think I do, but I suspect if we dig in there and wash them out a little bit, you'll be able to see, particularly near the top, that they do have this really sort of wrinkled appearance. It might be easier to see even if you have like a hand magnifying glass at home. It'll be a little bit easier to spot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I find that plants have this ability to kind of adjust themselves.
They do,
Yeah.
they do.
What I find is really nice is if you can find a place that actually sells succulents, but they put the name of it on there. So this one's really great because it has the genus and species name. The variety is called Chocolate Soldier.
Nice.
So a nice brown one, and it's I would say Kalanchoe tomentosa. Tomentosa means like furry or hairy. And you can feel the leaves are very velvety. And I just like this one a lot because I think it's a really easy, prolific grower, and it'll add a little bit of those brown tones to a planter that I'm hoping to do. Yeah, and then it gives you a little bit of information about how to care for it as well.
I think one of the common names may be, I might have to correct this in post.
Yeah.
One of the common names may be panda plant.
Oh, I'm not sure. I haven't
So we
heard
can
that,
look that.
but it could be.
Look that up.
So here's another one. You know, it definitely calls Sedum Adolphi. The variety is Firestorm, and it just gives you a little bit more information for the nerdy ones of us who like the names.
So where did you get these ones, particular ones?
I got these at Green Gate.
Okay, and did they have the label? They had the labels
Yes,
on
every
them?
individual one there is labeled.
Oh, that's
So I think
nice.
you almost have to go to garden centers that, you know, would invest in something like that to sell to their clients. Often you can get succulents here, there, and everywhere, but they're never labeled.
Right.
So if you can ever find some, I find it's really helpful to just pick up those. These are just some of the ones I have in a large collection that's ever growing.
Something really cool for us.
Yes, I do.
What
So
do you have?
this is interesting, but one of the things you can do is actually grow succulents from seed. And you can find packages of succulents. These ones are called hippie chicks. And basically what you find in here is a variety of what are called the hen and chicks. Semper, I want to say they're sempervivum, right? Yeah, and they are a mix of different colors. So the idea is that you'll plant a bunch of them and it'll grow into a nice little colorful succulent garden. There's great directions on the back about how to grow them, so I won't go into that. But what I would say is that if you start by seed, you have to have a lot of patience, because they recommend that you would plant these types of seeds probably in about April of the year, and you would be planting them to actually use the plants the following year.
Wow.
So if we planted these, say in April 2022, they might be ready for your garden or your arrangements for April 2023. Okay.
Wow, so when you're saying planting, when you're planting the seed, are you putting it under a grow light for that amount of time? Or?
What I would do is probably germinate them in the dark. So using a fine seedling type of mix, but adding sand to it, just you know, as any type of succulent would prefer in their more arid, natural environments. And then because the seeds are incredibly fine, like they can be as fine as dust or to petunia size seeds, which are actually quite small as well. What I would do is mix the seed in a separate bowl, say, with some of that fine potting soil. Okay, and just mix it really well so the seeds are evenly distributed in there. And then you could spread that mix out on top of your existing potting soil in a tray. And then you'll find over time you can see the tiny succulents germinate and grow. You just have to have a lot of patience with them. So once you actually see them, you know, have the seeds have germinated and you see tiny plants there, you'll definitely need to give them some supplementary light. So they can photosynthesize.
Nice.
Yeah.
And are these having to be zone 3 or 4? Like,
So,
what are they?
Right. So there's different types and groups of succulents, but if we're talking about the sempervivums or sempervivums, the hen and chicks, I believe they go down to zone 3. So you can have them as outdoor plants here.
Nice.
Yeah, other type of succulents really in nature live in warmer climates. And those, of course, you can't overwinter. And I also brought another package. This is a cactus mixture. So essentially you can do the same type of thing with and grow your own cactus if you're interested in that. So just to follow up with the aftercare for these transplanted plants, what I'm going to do is just leave them probably for another week. Make sure that soil is getting quite dry. And then what I'll do is give them a good watering. Okay, and I usually like to do that with a little bit of fertilizer, because we talked about these soilless mixes basically not having any nutrients. So I usually use an all-purpose type of fertilizer, usually at about 1/4 strength is what I've mixed it to, and then water them, soak them, then definitely let them drain really well. Okay, and then just let them be. It'll be quite a long time till they need another water.
Patricia, when you say all-purpose fertilizer, do you mean 10-10-10?
Yes, something where the 3 fertilizer numbers, the NPK, are similar. I just wanted to give you this
Sweet
little aloe.
Aww.
You can have that for yourself, and thank you so much for contacting me and all the fun we've had making this video together.
I get a little plant.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So that's it for today, guys. Until the next time, from me and Patricia.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.